Perfect. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining this session. I'm Leila, and I'm here to present a study titled The Status of the Eurasian Hoopoe in Lebanon and its Effect on the Pine processionary caterpillar infestations. So before we start, let me just run you through the outline of what we'll be discussing today. So first, I will introduce myself and the organizations that I represent. Then I will provide a bit of background on why we selected the two species. I will tell you a bit about Lebanon, our study area, a brief outlook on the objectives of the study, the methodology that we followed for data collection, storage, processing, and analysis. Then we will move to our key findings. And here I will tell you what worked and what did not in our case. And lastly, we will end with some lessons learned and guidelines for future research, and of course, a conclusion. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Leila from Lebanon. I have a master's degree in forestry from the Lebanese University and currently work as a researcher at the American University of Beirut. And this research is part of my master's thesis, which was done in collaboration with Lebanon Reforestation Initiative, one of the Lebanese NGOs. Now, just to provide a bit of background on why we led the study in the first place. So the pine processionary moth that you're seeing now on the screen is the most important forest defoliator in the Mediterranean region. It has long been attacking Mediterranean trees and especially pines. So pine trees of all species are its host. So the larvae that you're seeing at the bottom right of the photo, they consume pine needles. They defoliate the tree and make it more weak and more vulnerable to other pests, diseases, and any other stress. And add to that, the caterpillars have fine hairs on them, which cause allergies in humans and mammals. So Lebanon is a small country on the eastern Mediterranean. You can see it in orange, right next to Syria. And this is where our study is based. In Lebanon, 50% total land area is covered by forests. And as you can see in the chart, conifers make up around 32% of the total forested area. And in that 32%, pine trees make up more than 50%, which means that the most of the best times in Lebanon. Several control methods have been used before. So there is pesticides, the manual collection of the nests and their burning, pheromone traps, and of course, a yearly spraying of biocontrol agents. For example, the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis has been used and tested. But the techniques used and their timings were not very optimal because the pest is still widely spread today. So this calls for more research with a special focus on natural predators. So in Lebanon, all types of natural predators are found for the pine processionary moth, from pathogens such as viruses, bacteria, nematodes, and fungi to larger predators such as amphibians, reptiles, spiders, insects, bats, and of course, most importantly, birds. So when it comes to avifauna, Lebanon, due to its location on the two main migration routes, is characterized as a bottleneck site. And it has 404 species of birds and 15 internationally declared important bird areas. Now, it's true that multiple bird species feed on the pine processionary moth in its larval stage. However, it is only the Eurasian hoopoe that you're now seeing on the screen that's able to feed on the pupae buried underground because it has a very long beak and is able to dig deep into the soil. So in Lebanon, the Eurasian hoopoe is among the birds that undergo partial migration. So part of the population spends the winter in Europe, but the vast majority moves in autumn to Africa and returns in spring, passing over Lebanon in both ways. However, the passage of birds over Lebanon is not the safest, despite the fact that the country has signed multiple international conventions to protect migratory birds. It has a very strong hunting law, but today it remains not fully implemented, leaving nature in a chaotic state. So based on the preliminary assessment of the scope and scale of illegal killing of birds in the Mediterranean, conducted by Bird Conservation International, the density of illegal hunting is super high in Lebanon. It reaches up to 335 birds per square kilometer. And an estimate of almost 500,000 to 1 million individual birds are illegally killed per year. Which brings us to this research aiming to reinforce bird conservation. So this research is based on a citizen science approach, and it aims at understanding the status of the Eurasian hoopoe in Lebanon. It also aims at assessing the damage caused by the pine processionary moth, mapping the distribution of the two species, and attempting to correlate their distribution. So given multiple factors, this research was based exclusively on citizen science. So citizen science, I'm sure you know, is a remarkable methodology when it comes to ornithology, because scientists would not be able to collect data from all over the country by themselves. So they need the support of citizens. So we used various tools to document citizen observations of the Eurasian hoopoe, and also their personal assessment of the damage caused by the pine processionary moth. So first, we circulated an online survey on a Google form, and this form circulated from June till October 2022, and we asked citizens to add any inputs for the past 5 years where they saw any of the two species. Passive data was also collected from social media, more specifically from Facebook, which is one of the most widely used social media platforms in Lebanon. So we entered keywords into the search engine, filtered them, and extracted the information that we needed. We also conducted key informant interviews with hunters, with bird watchers, photographers, hikers, scientists, people that love nature. So anyone that could have any information on either of the two species was contacted. And lastly, we looked at online open access databases such as eBird and, of course, iNaturalist. And for example, eBird is one of the very common databases for bird observations, and it has already been used in more than 100 scientific publications. And after data collection, we filtered all the inputs to remove, of course, the ones that are outdated, any incomplete information, any misleading information. And we stored them in one Microsoft Excel workbook containing 2 sheets. So the first sheet had 391 Eurasian hoopoe records, and the second had 87 pine processionary moth records. After that, we created distribution maps on ArcMap with an overlay of important bird areas and responsible hunting areas. So this map represents the distribution of the two species between 2017 and 2022. And as you can see, so we're looking at the Eurasian hoopoe in blue and the pine processionary moth in yellow dots. There is already some kind of overlap between the two. Really, an interesting point that we noticed from the responses on the Google form was that approximately the same number of people who spotted the Eurasian hoopoe had also seen the pine processionary moth, which further supports our hypothesis. And of course, we couldn't just take this information as is, we had to validate it statistically. So we conducted a least squares means one-way analysis, or ANOVA, test separately on the bird count and the moth damage. However, no statistically valid correlation between the two species was found at this stage. This is due to many inconveniences that we're highlighting here for future scientists who would want to work on this topic to avoid. So the precision on moth damage was much higher than the precision on bird count, meaning that if a bird was counted in a specific region, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only bird found there. Similarly, if no bird was counted, it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no bird in that region. The adopted bird count was statistically insignificant. It was Almost all regions had a similar average, meaning that it was more of a bird spotting rather than a counting. And we also had two opposing reverse patterns. So if you look at the figures, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but in Shuf, for example, we have a very high bird count and a very high moth damage. Whereas in Zgherta, we have a high bird count, but a low moth damage. So we didn't stop there. We shifted our interest and tried to adapt to more tangible starting points because the study is somehow the first of its kind in Lebanon. So we conducted an independent sample t-test to compare the moth damage within and outside important bird areas. And the statistical results showed that a high pine processionary moth damage exists outside important bird areas, and a low pine processionary moth damage is found inside important bird areas. So this finding highlights the importance of birds as natural predators of the moth. So I'm almost finishing. So based on the lessons learned in this study, we will offer some guiding bullets for future researchers working on the same objectives. So first, start with a smaller scale. It's definitely better to focus on a specific region instead of trying to work on the nation as a whole. Take more time in data collection. It's also interesting to see the seasonal distribution of the two species. Reinforce field assessment because on the ground validation of the data and just filtering on the ground helps a lot. Involve more and more citizen scientists because there can never be enough data. Include other factors in your data collection, for example, hunting activities in the region, the surface of the forest, surrounding environment, any kind of additional factors that could give signs to the study. And for more scientifically significant results, the study needs to be conducted in a controlled environment. And of course, if provided with sufficient funding and given a long enough period of time, integrating non-invasive AI techniques such as trap cams to monitor the nests, GPS tracking the birds, or any other methods would allow for optimum results. So to conclude, it is true that this research didn't lead to a valid correlation between the two species. However, it was able to highlight understudied species in Lebanon as a start and set the path for future much-needed research to unveil the underlying linkages between them. And this is especially important, knowing that further pest outbreaks are expected with climate change and that they could cause serious threats to our forests and our health. Now, this is it from my end. I thank you so much for listening and remain available on social media, by email, and anywhere. So thanks again. Ready for the questions.